Councilmanic Prerogative. It's an unwritten rule here in Philly that basically gives district council members a lot of power. They can greenlight new developments in their districts or bring projects to a complete stop. Over in North Philly, there's growing tension between Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young Jr. and community members after he used Councilmanic Prerogative to block the long-planned reconstruction of the Cecil B. Moore Library. So does this peculiar Philly practice get in the way of progress? I'm chatting with Daniel Pearson, columnist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And after the interview, we've got a conversation sponsored by PA Preferred with Russell Redding, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture. Stick around to learn about the program and how it helps Pennsylvania residents shop for better produce. It's Wednesday, January 7th. I'm Trinae Nari, and we're talking politics. Daniel, catch us up on this saga involving the Cecil B. Moore Library. This is all happening in the 5th District, and why people outside of the Sharswood neighborhood should even care or maybe even be concerned about what's happening with this project.
Yeah, so the Cecil B. Moore Library is a library in North Philadelphia along Cecil B. Moore Avenue. It was built back in the 1960s, and it was named after Cecil B. Moore, who is a legendary civil rights activist, World War II veteran from Philadelphia.
His face is on a lot of murals in the city.
Yes, he was a contemporary of Dr. King's, and he was really the leader for civil rights in Philadelphia at the time. So this is a library that has a lot of history and emotional resonance in the community, but it's kind of fallen into disrepair. I mean, it's from 1961. So you can imagine some of the things in the building need to be updated. The bathrooms are not ADA accessible. The basement is not ADA accessible. So the city under Mayor Kenny came up with a plan called Rebuild, which was meant to help playgrounds and libraries across the city, including Cecil B. Moore. The library secured, millions of dollars. That raised actually more money because they said that the building had, more work that needed to be done. And it was supposed to start the renovations in 2024. And why people should care is because these renovations aren't being held up by an architectural need or an engineering survey or a need for money. It's being held up on the whim of one person. The district council member for the neighborhood, Jeffrey J. Young Jr., who's from the area. He's lived there, from what I understand, basically his entire life. He was elected in 2023. He was kind of elected by default because everybody else got knocked off the ballot and the challenge against him was withdrawn. And he kind of came in and said, I don't want to renovate this library. Mm-hmm. I don't think any renovation could make this library good enough for what the community deserves. I want a new library. And that's really what is upsetting people because most of the community does not agree with his assessment and would like the renovations to go forward as planned.
Okay, let's break this down a little bit. Let's talk about first the money that was allocated for this project. So you say that the city during the Kenny administration had more than $10 million allocated for this project?
It wasn't initially that much.
Okay.
So it was a smaller number initially. So there's a group called the Save Cecil B. Moore Library Coalition.
They're the ones organizing to save the current site of the library.
Yes.
Okay.
And so they actually began their work before Jay came into office because they saw what was being allocated from Rebuild and said that's not really enough for the library. Maybe it could fix some of the problems, but we need more things. I mean, in particular, they want an elevator so that way everybody can access the lower floors of that building. Which right now can't be used because it's not ADA accessible. So they went back to the council member at the time, Darrell Clark, and they said, you need to get some more money. They actually convinced Jay Young to help them secure some more money as well. So the amount of money has kind of been trickling up over time. for what's available to renovate this library. Now it's about $10 million that's been allocated. And it could be spent, tomorrow if Councilmember Young signed a notice to proceed, but he's been unwilling to sign that. So it's held up the renovations, and people in the neighborhood that I've talked to, they really don't seem sure why Councilmember Young is so adamantly against renovating the original space. He's talked about wanting a teen center and more technology and how the building's too small. But a lot of people have said, hey, look, we have this huge basement that we could use for all these things. We just need an elevator. We don't need a whole new building. That's kind of been the whole controversy there, is why is Councilmember Young so adamantly opposed to renovation when that's the most popular option repeatedly in community surveys?
Daniel, when I read and heard that this group, Save Cecil B. Moore Library Coalition, was able to organize the way they do, I see all of the social posts online. I'm just so impressed. This is a large sum of money. And so let me just kind of figure this all out. So the bottom line here is that Councilmember Young is refusing to sign this notice to proceed. Why is that necessary to kind of like take the next steps?
So in Philadelphia, we have basically, divided government, just like most places in America. You have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. But we have this unique local tradition called Councilmanic Prerogative or Councilmanic Privilege. Other cities that have district council members, they have their own versions. They call it Aldermanic Privilege in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They call it member deference in New York City. And basically, it means that legislators are kind of sticking their toes into what's typically thought of as executive responsibilities, like deciding if the library gets renovated.
Or they basically can green light a new development, like new housing, or
Yes.
they could say no.
Yes. They have incredible discretion over these projects. And if you have a council member that's more supportive of development, you're going to get a lot of new development in your neighborhood. And if you have one who doesn't, you're not going to get that. And the approach varies significantly from district to district. A lot of people say that's not, a smart way of doing things, because you might have a totally different set of rules. Let's say you own a coffee shop and you want to open another neighborhood. All of a sudden, it's a completely different set of rules and regulations. You got to hire a lawyer and a lobbyist maybe, and all these, complicated things. City council loves this tradition. You can't get them to criticize it. You can't get them to think about it twice. They say, look, this is us standing up for the community. But in projects like the Cecil B. Moore Library, it's very easy to see how the community itself can be victimized by this, because all this discretion is just in one person's hands. It's not like they're part of a board or something else. It really just goes on whether they like it or not. And they don't have to really justify their decisions, because their colleagues can't or won't do anything to overturn what they're saying.
So, Daniel, what do you think we should do about Councilmanic Prerogative? I assume you think we should maybe get rid of it, or is it good in some aspects?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of place for community input, especially when it comes to things like a library, renovation or a new library. I think, residents have an absolute right to talk about how, tax dollars are going to be spent on projects in their neighborhood. But I don't think that there's any redeeming factor to prerogative. I think it's bad for business. It's bad for communities. It's gotten people in trouble repeatedly.
What do you mean?
So there've been, some city council members who've gone to federal prison over the years. Bobby Heenan is the most recent member. My council member growing up, Rick Mariano, also went to prison. There was the ab scam scandal in the 80s. And when you look at these cases, it has to do with prerogative a lot of the time, because when there's not a set legal system that everybody has to abide by, and there's all this discretionary power given to one person to either say yes or no, people go to that person with offers, even if they're not somebody who solicits those type of things. And they say, hey, look, I am having such a hard time with the zoning board. I really need to get my business open. I'm spending, $10,000 a month on rent and legal fees. How about I give your campaign $15,000 and we get this over with? That's essentially what happened in Rick Mariano's case. He took bribes from local business people who wanted to get through the ZBA faster. It's what happened with Abscam as well. So it creates a really dangerous kind of discretion for the council members. And there are other ways to make sure that the community is heard, especially when, can any one person really say that they understand how everybody feels? No matter how much community outreach you do, there's always going to be people you didn't talk to or who didn't know about the meeting or the survey and didn't get their answer in time. And sometimes you need to have things set up in a way that it's predictable, where, if you're going to get approved or not is not up to chance, especially for economic growth. This is a city that just stopped being the poorest big city in America. We need jobs. We need businesses. You look at all the neighborhoods outside of, Center City and Fishtown and Chestnut Hill, and there's not enough businesses. There's not enough places to buy groceries. There's not enough places to get medicine. There's not enough restaurants. There's not enough jobs for people to go in their own neighborhood. And a lot of that's because people don't want to deal with this. They don't want to deal with doing things the right way and only to have a rogue council member say, well, I don't like you, which, that happens sometimes. They just don't like somebody and they don't want to approve them.
Right. So, Daniel, I'm hearing you say that this Philly tradition, this practice, kind of stops progress kind of in its tracks. Are there any other examples of this councilmanic prerogative currently happening in the city?
Yeah, I've criticized Councilmember Young quite a bit because I think he's one of the more egregious people with the power. The second most egregious, in my opinion, is probably Cindy Bass, who represents Northwest Philadelphia.
And that's the 8th district.
Yes, and it's particularly in Germantown. Germantown has a lot of vacant buildings, both big and small. There was an organization called Germantown Settlement that bought up a lot of housing, and most of that is vacant. There was the Ada Lewis Middle School, which is currently vacant. There's the Germantown YWCA, which is currently vacant, and Germantown Hall, which is also vacant. Moving forward on those properties means getting approval from Councilmember Bass. And in the whole time that she's been in office, she has not been willing to support any realistic development plans for these locations.
Why? Why is that?
It is really hard to understand. Some of it is that there are some aspects of what she says that make sense. For example, she says that the development industry in Philadelphia is very white, and she wants to make sure that these kind of great opportunities for development go to somebody who could use a hand up in the industry as opposed to one of the established players. And that's understandable. What people don't necessarily understand is why she went with KBK, which is a group from not this area, to do the work when they haven't been able to move forward in years. And she's not always willing to, give, complete answers on her rationale. And neither is Councilmember Young. You get a lot of, well, I need more community input, or the community didn't want this, when you can talk to people who say, no, I did want this. It's not like there was a clear consensus. It's something where there's a lot of different opinions and you kind of have to side with some people and move forward. And, if you're always looking for consensus, you're never going to be able to move on. And there's real consequences to this. It's not like it's free. I mean, the longer the building sits vacant, the more graffiti ends up there, the more, people think, oh, maybe this is a good place to do bad things. There's a lot of research that says that blight leads to violence. People use abandoned homes to sell drugs and use drugs. They use it for all sorts of criminal activity. Kata Scott, who was murdered last year and abducted, she was buried at Ada Lewis, which was abandoned. Councilmember Bass was really upset with people who criticized her over that because it's not her fault that Kata Scott was murdered, but she did not support the plan to redevelop that lot. And if the lot had been redeveloped, people would have noticed. If somebody pulled up in a car in the middle of the night, I mean, there would be people living there. And eyes on the street is one of the best ways to promote safety. So the blight that comes from this is not something to be dismissed either.
We've got more on this conversation after the break. PA Preferred makes it easy to choose local and support the farmers who grow and make the food and products we rely on every day. And the variety is honestly incredible. Pennsylvania isn't just dairy and sweet corn. We're the #1 mushroom-producing state in the country. We've got apples, hops, honey, maple syrup, flowers, and even fibers from alpacas and sheep. If you want to find PA Preferred products near you, start at papreferred.com. You can search for farms, farmers markets, and local producers in your neighborhood. And with the 2026 Pennsylvania Farm Show coming up in January, it's the perfect time to explore everything our agriculture community has to offer. Choose local, choose PA Preferred. Visit papreferred.com. That's papreferred.com. Paid for with Pennsylvania tax dollars. All right, Daniel, I want to get back into the Cecil B. Moore Library project. Yeah. To be fair, though, Councilmember Young isn't saying no or even, let's take away the library. He actually wants to put it in a more modern building. A mixed-use building is what you report, with affordable housing above and having the library services below. He also cited like a need for teens to have a space because Lord knows I got a teenager and it's like, well, what can I do in the city? And yet you also reported that he's never produced a rendering or other documentation to prove that his plan is even feasible. So like, what's up with that? Like, how does that make sense? So I mean, in my opinion, like it sounds reasonable to have like more affordable housing and a library in this neighborhood.
Yeah, I actually, am not totally opposed to having housing and a library together. The only issue is that the free library is not a landlord.
True.
Being a landlord is actually, difficult. And I think it's easy to dismiss how much work, especially for a multi-family unit, actually goes into making that happen and keeping things occupied. And I don't know that the city is necessarily the best person to handle that. And then you get into really complicated arrangements where it's like, okay, is the library going to be a tenant of the new apartment building?
Or is the apartment building going to be a tenant of the city? Got it. Okay. Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard to answer. And if the plan had been proposed initially, when, rebuild was first happening, we were first talking about these renovations, I think some people would have been more open to the idea because that's when you dream big, right? Is at the beginning. But the way that he did it was at the very end of the process, right before the renovation was about to start. And it really alarmed people because they said, what is this about housing? I haven't heard about housing. I didn't ask for housing at any of the meetings that I went to for this library.
So they felt blindsided pretty much.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Councilmember Young last month introduced a resolution to hold hearings to investigate the conditions of Philly libraries. What's that about? And do you think that that is a waste of time?
Yeah, I mean, we just had rebuild. So I would hope that, rebuild would have given the city a pretty good view into the state of the libraries and playgrounds, because that was the whole point, right? Is going through all of our libraries and playgrounds and saying which ones need updating, which ones are in good shape. So I would think that the city already has a good sense of where money needs to go. And when it comes to Cecil B. Moore Library, the coalition has already secured additional funds. I mean, they want a lot of the same things. They want a good place for teenagers to hang out.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just that they believe that the current building is more than able to handle that. And that's the easiest way to get things done quickly with a minimal amount of disruption for everybody, is just to say, hey, look, let's fix this current building. And now, to be fair, Councilmember Young has kind of heard the opposition to his housing plan. He gave up on that based on the last meeting that I attended with him and the Cecil B. Moore Coalition. Now he wants to move the library down the block, which would allow them to build it without closing the current one. But people still feel, look, we're supposed to have this soon. I mean, it's been a year plus since construction was supposed to start. And instead of having our renovated, updated library now, and also there's not enough funding for his new library either. So the $10 million isn't really enough for his plan, which, again, there's no rendering or design or anything like that. It's all, rhetorical at this point. But the $10 million is not going to be enough to cover that. They probably would need another $5 or $10 million. And nobody's entirely sure where they would find all of that money. So there's a lot of reasons why people are skeptical of his ability to deliver on his ideas.
Okay, so tell us about Councilmember Young, though, because you've been following his work and his career. He's someone you find yourself writing about a lot. What's your assessment? Is he, like, you're right, he sort of kind of like sometimes stirs up trouble, controversy, but then, he does have these pushback moments that maybe have some type of merit. What's your assessment? Tell us about Councilmember Young.
Yeah, I mean, he's from North Philadelphia. He grew up not far from the library. He went to Girard College, which can't be summed up in a couple sentences, but is very close to the library. It's a private school with no tuition that almost entirely serves young Black children in Philadelphia at this point. So his viewpoint is absolutely shaped by that. And he was also a former legislative staffer for Darrell Clark, who was once council president himself. My newsroom colleagues, and these aren't even opinion colleagues, these are straight news colleagues, they called him a quarrelsome contrarian, which I read that and I was like, wow, they got that through the editors. But I don't think that's an inaccurate assessment. He is extremely skeptical of expert figures, city officials. If you listen to him at hearings, he often feels like, these folks are trying to get one over on people. And I understand that to a degree.
Right, because he's from this neighborhood.
Yeah, so I understand to a degree where he's coming from, because I'm a lifelong Philadelphian too. And there have been, bad things that have happened that the city has done over time. I mean, this is before both me or Jay were born, but the city dropped a bomb on its own residents at one point.
Right.
And so I understand skepticism. But when you start extending that skepticism to community groups that are campaigning to renovate their library, it gets to be a bit much. He's worked on city council before, so he's a lawyer, so he knows, how the law works and how things are typically done. He's absolutely qualified for the job in that sense. But I do think that, there has to be a balance to your skepticism, especially when you cross over into being an elected official yourself.
So, what is the bigger picture here? What does this indicate about how city council deals with projects in their districts and how much power a city council member, a district city council member, let's be specific,
Mhm.
has to stop a project, even when there are voices, a lot of loud voices from the community in the room?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is something that kind of illustrates just how empty city council's defense of prerogative really is. Because if you ask council members, hey, why do you think this is a good policy? Why do we keep doing this? They will almost always tell you because it protects the community. It gives the community a say. It helps the community avoid being steamrolled by the Sixers or some other big corporation that just wants to come in and make money and do their thing. But in reality, this proposal is supported by the community. The community wants this library renovated. Most of the surveys are overwhelmingly in favor of renovation. And the only reason it's not is because one guy refuses to sign a piece of paper. That's not really a good way of doing things. It's not a helpful way of doing things. It doesn't inspire, honest people to want to do business in this city because if you're a good business person, you don't want to have to deal with, schmoozing your account. You just want to sell your burgers or your shoes or whatever it is that you got into business for. You don't want to think about these things at all. But if you're kind of, a sketchy business person who's maybe not actually that good at selling shoes or burgers, this system works great because you can make buddies with somebody and keep out the competition or get your stuff approved faster. It doesn't actually help the community do anything. It really just helps the council members maintain control. You have to make friends with them and lobby them and go to their fundraisers. I really, don't see any benefit to the wider public from this. And I think that it's a perfect distillation of how prerogative makes things worse for everybody.
Daniel, you have a new column in the Inquirer called Shake a Maxon. What hole in local opinion journalism would you say you're trying to fill with this column?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows my colleague Will Bunch, who was our national columnist. They probably know Trudy Rubin, who's our international columnist. They're both institutions. But there's really nobody else that I know of who writes a political column dedicated to City Hall and to Harrisburg. But I've always thought, look, what's going on in City Hall matters. It shapes whether you have a library or a playground in your neighborhood. It shapes how our transit system operates. So if you have a council that feels like they can do whatever they want and there's nobody out there who's going to say, hey, that's good or that's bad, I don't think that's good for the city. I think that they need that kind of opinionated coverage. I think my colleagues do a great job of covering them from a straight news perspective. But my column, I think, really filled a niche of where, a lot of people would say, wow, that's a really terrible idea. But you can't write that as a political journalist on the newsroom side. You have to find somebody to say it. And sometimes they're not willing to say it on the record because they got to do business with that member of council in the future. So my column kind of says a lot of things that people have been saying that nobody's been writing. And it's really about accountability. And I called it Shack and Maxon because so my friend Sandy Smith, who is a longtime journalist, hosts a Quizzo, and he had a Lenape translation round right before I launched my column. And Shack and Maxon was one of the things that we were asked to translate. And I thought, hey, I don't know what that means. He told us at the end what it means. And it basically refers to what's now known as Penn Treaty Park in Fishtown. That's where William Penn came and signed that famous treaty with the Lenape people and Chief Tamanend. And it actually had been a meeting ground for politics for Lenape people for quite some time. there was a beautiful elm tree that used to stand there. It got knocked over in a bad storm. And that's where they used to meet. That was their city hall, in a sense, or their state capitol building. And they would make agreements there. They would come and solve disputes there. They would inaugurate new chiefs, or their word for chief was sakem. That's where you get Shakamaksin, kind of the transliteration of that. So I thought, wow, that's actually a perfect name for my column because it shows the continuity, right? Because people have this idea that, the Europeans came here and they built everything in this country. And we know that's not true, right?
Yes.
So it's a nod to the fact that, hey, the Lenape people were here. They had their own government, and Penn himself was part of it, right? By coming there, making the treaty, he was making himself a fellow Sakem in their eyes, and he was participating in the government system that already existed. And so I decided to name it that because I thought it was uniquely Philadelphian. This is a city where we have so many things that are named after Lenape people. Passyunk, Monument Singh, Conshohocken. That's a deep part of our culture, is to have these place names and these nods to their heritage here. But I thought when I was sitting there, and I heard the name, I said, wow, this is perfect. And I have to give Sandy credit. He's a longtime Philly journalist who writes a lot of housing and transportation over at Philly Mag. Really, Sandy gets credit for giving me the idea indirectly for calling it Shakamaksin.
It's such a beautiful story. Now, I'm actually going to see, next time I play Quizzo, I feel like you know a lot. And so I'm not the best at Quizzo, but I like it. So I'm going to have you on my team. All right, Daniel Pearson, thank you so much for chatting with me about the Cecil B. Moore Library Project.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. And I hope this can make a difference for the coalition.
On next Wednesday's politics episode, we're scheduled to talk to Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young Jr. about the Cecil B. Moore Library and the larger issue of Councilmanic Prerogative. So definitely tune in for that. And in the meantime, we reached out to him for a statement in response to criticism over his opposition to the reconstruction of the library. He wrote, "My office will continue to provide necessary funding to keep the current Cecil B. Moore Library operational. Due to over 30 years of deferred maintenance and neglect by the city of Philadelphia, that library is functionally obsolete to meet 21st century standards. Over that same period, literacy rates in North Philadelphia have declined as well. After community input, we are no longer pursuing a mixed-use option. Rather, we are imagining a new state-of-the-art library to provide resources the community needs to grow into the future." We also reached out to Councilmember Cindy Bass for a comment, but we didn't hear back from her. Hey, don't go anywhere in just a second. We've got a segment sponsored by PA Preferred. CityCast Pittsburgh executive producer Mallory Folk is chatting with Russell Redding, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture, about how this program could help you get better fruits and vegetables.
CityCast Pittsburgh executive producer Mallory Falk here with Russell Redding, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture for PA Preferred. Can you start by telling me what exactly the PA Preferred program is?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. PA Preferred is our state official brand that recognizes products that are grown here, raised here, processed in Pennsylvania. And it really was our way of recognizing what we do in the state, but more importantly, make sure that the producers got credit for what they were doing in the marketplace and for consumers to find what we do here. It's a very complicated marketplace. This is our official brand. It's a PA Preferred with a keystone, with a check mark, and PA Preferred, easy to identify. But that was the original thought in 2004, and it stood the test of time here for the last 20 plus years.
And what is the best way for people to find PA Preferred products and support the Pennsylvania farmers who are, creating these products?
It's changing every day. We've got over 1,000 members in the PA Preferred program. Best thing to do is to go into papreferred.com, right? You can put in the products you're searching for. You can put in your zip code. You can look at your county. That's the easiest way. Then you can sort it by how you want to find the products, right? Or where you're traveling to as an example, or where you shop.
And what are some of the more surprising or maybe unexpected agricultural products that are grown or processed here in Pennsylvania? Like the kinds of things that somebody might not think to look out for a local version of?
Well, we always start with mushrooms. And I say we have 60+% of the mushrooms produced in the United States in Pennsylvania, almost in one county in the eastern part of the state. But you have, fresh cut flowers and greenhouse products. There are some great wood products. Penn's Woods, if you think about Pennsylvania's name, they're all world-renowned. Pennsylvania hardwoods are PA preferred. Jams and jellies and preserves from PA. The ice cream, of course, from Pennsylvania. You have all the fiber arts. I mean, anything from alpaca to sheep to livestock, all of that's PA preferred. And of course, just the staples of good maple syrup and apples and grapes and hops. We can go on, but you've got 1,000 options inside PA preferred.
Pennsylvania maple syrup is one of my favorites.
It's the best.
Yeah. So for anybody who wants to really immerse themselves in local agriculture, I know that the annual Pennsylvania Farm Show is happening January 10th to 17th. The butter sculpture, always a big draw, always a fan favorite. But what else can people expect there this year?
Well, we're proud. We're going to have the PA Farm Show, 110th anniversary of the Farm Show. Growing a Nation is our theme. It's America 250. You cannot tell the story of Farm Show of Pennsylvania without talking about the journey of agriculture over the last 250 years. We're going to celebrate that. You're going to see, some great sort of special guests that fit the period. We've got a lot of different pop-ups of PA companies and major brands from PA that are going to help us celebrate. The butter sculpture, of course, will be there. The PA Preferred Market Stand, the Culinary Connection. We've got all kinds of critters and kids. Every show ring is going to be full. So you've got 6,000 animals that are going to be there over the course of sort of 8 days, 500,000 people, great food, the food court, PA product. And it really is a moment to sort of both celebrate the moment of agriculture and where we are, but also the history and the journey that brought us here.
Animals and a butter sculpture, what better way to celebrate?
Yeah, that's a good day, right? You get the butter sculpture, 6,000 animals, good food, and a lot of your best friends will be here. So enjoy it.
Well, Russell, thank you so much for being here. Again, you can check out papreferred.com to learn more, and we will have that link in our show notes so that you are just a click away. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think about this episode and maybe who else you'd like us to have a chat with for our weekly politics episode. Also, share this with a friend and rate the show. Leave us a review and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.